Hi guys, I'm glad you're here to review for your very first test for American history. I'm proud of you for taking out the time in your busy lives to do this. Alright, so we're going to begin with exploration and early colonization of America. And if you remembered, we briefly kind of reminded you about Columbus sailing to the New World in 1492. He claimed the ocean blue. And because of what he did in 1492, all of a sudden, we had European countries competing for land. We had Spain, France, and England. If you remember, Spain was here, France was over here with fur trade. Britain came in this territory. So Spain controlled the southwestern portion of North America and most of South America. And the Spanish ruled by conquering the natives and becoming wealthy off the resources such as gold. France controlled the interior portion of North America. The French ruled by building relationships with the natives and becoming trading partners. And they became wealthy from trading goods such as furs. England controlled the eastern coast of North America and far, far north up here in Canada. The English came to America for economic reasons, money, mostly in the Virginia area, and then religious area for religious freedom over here in Massachusetts. Wealth first came from cash crops, and those were in the southern colonies, such as tobacco. So remember that day where we talked about Jamestown versus Plymouth? So Jamestown, and I told you, do not forget that it was the very first successful English settlement in the New World. And it began in what year? 1607. Jamestown was started by the Virginia Company of London in hopes of making a profit from gold. The start was a rough one. And remember, we talked about the starving time, and researchers have discovered cannibalism took place. But John Smith saved the day with help from friendly Indians like Pocahontas. Remember, Pocahontas and John Smith did not have a relationship. Disney has lied to you. But the settlement did survive, and it became profitable because John Rolfe, who eventually marries Pocahontas, began growing the cash crop of tobacco. There's John Smith, and there is that picture of Pocahontas I showed you in class. And there is a gentleman smoking tobacco. All right, so now for the Pilgrims. Pilgrims landed in Plymouth. This is in Massachusetts. The success of Virginia was followed up in the area that would become Massachusetts in 1620. A group of pilgrims founded Plymouth as a place to worship their religion. The first winter was rough and many died. They made friends with the natives such as Squanto and Samoset, and they helped the settlers adapt to the environment. As a symbol of the relationship between the English and the natives, a celebration was held, and this became the very first Thanksgiving. And there is a beautiful picture of the first Thanksgiving. So let's go ahead and focus on the 13 colonies. So this area is going to be what we call the New England colonies, and it's important that you know the economic, the way they made their money. So mostly in this area it was rocky soil, so they really couldn't do a lot of cash crops, in fact, not much at all. So they did trade in furs and skins. They also had cattle and grain. But it wasn't a lot of grain that could be for mass consumption. There was, of course, lots of fish in the waters. They did find iron later, ships they could build with all the timber. They also eventually produced rum and whaling blubber, which was used for fuel back then. So that was a big deal. So the New England colonies were Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. They all began as Puritan colonies. The geography is hilly and rocky. The soil is poor and only supports subsistence farming. That means really just for your necessity, not to make a lot of money. The cold winters make for a very short growing season. As a result, the economy consisted of fishing, whaling, shipping, timber, furs, and livestock. So the next section would be the middle colonies. The middle colonies were New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Most were proprietary colonies with one or more owner. The geography is mostly rolling plains and forests. They called this area the bread basket because the soil was very fertile and allowed for cash crops of grain. The mild summers and short winters allowed for a substantial growing season. The people and economy of the middle colonies were diverse. People of all nationalities and religions were welcome because there was lots of them coming in. There were Baptists, Baptists started a little bit later, but there were Jews in this area, there were Catholics, and there were Protestants. Let's see, the people and economy were very diverse. People of all nationalities and religions were welcome. The economy consisted of livestock, grain, fishing, furs, shipping, and iron. Last but not least, the southern colonies. The southern colonies were Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Most began as royal colonies. The geography is flat, coastal plains with wide rivers. The warm summers and short winters provided nearly year-round growing season, and the economy revolved around the plantation system, cash crops grown with slave labor. The major cash crop were tobacco, rice, and indigo, and that is why most of the slaves were found in the southern colonies. And that is another picture of all of them. All right, so let's talk a little bit about economic activity. We did that fun game, mercantilism, in class. So the colony sent natural resources. So they harvested the natural things like timber, and they sent it to the parent company, England. And then England would make manufactured goods. So for instance, they would make furniture and they would sell it in the colonies. The parent company would sell manufactured goods back to the colonies to make a profit. The parent company, or what I like to call them, the mother company, always benefited the most from the system. They even passed laws to force colonists to trade only with them. And I also briefly mentioned the Navigation Acts in class, which also made it to where they had to bring their product on English ships because English wanted to tax everything and get the benefit. Triangular trade, and you did that mapping class. It was a system of trade between the colonies, Europe and Africa, and the West Indies. The Middle Passage was the leg of the triangular trade that saw the importation of slaves to the Americas. So right here, very, very big deal. And they were packed in there like sardines to the point where they really couldn't move. They would just sometimes vomit on each other, go to the bathroom on each other, and it was what they were breathing. There was lots of crying, and many of them, if they could get some fresh air, they would try to jump overboard and die. It was miserable. All right, the English in America representative government begins. Okay, so we talked about the Magna Carta. This was the great charter signed by King John of England in 1215. This document limited the power of the king and protected the rights of his subjects. Only the nobles, though, not the peasants. The House of Burgesses, this began in Virginia. It was a group that started in 1619. It was the very first, you need to remember this, first elected representative body in America, and it would later inspire our House of Representatives, and we'll really discuss that in Chapter 6, but keep that in mind. The Mayflower Compact, as you should know by now, signed in 1620. This was an agreement among the Plymouth settlers for self-government. It was the first attempt at self-government for the good of the colony. All the people on the ship said, let's make decisions based on the good of the colony. They would use the town hall meetings and majority rule to decide any laws. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, this was created in the colonies in 1639. It was the first written constitution. So the Mayflower Compact was the first attempt at self-government. This was the actual first written constitution in America. It provided a detailed plan of government in which power rested with the people, and we would utilize parts of this for our constitution that we obey today as a country. The English Bill of Rights, this was over in England in 1689. William and Mary were ruling England, and they agreed to the English Bill of Rights. This greatly limited the power of the monarchy, and it protected the rights of the English people. It was the English Bill of Rights that inspired America's Bill of Rights that we obey today, like the right for free speech, the right to petition, religious freedom, and so on. All of this was representative government, self-government. So we borrowed ideas from England to formulate what we did, which eventually led to our Constitution. All right, so this is also going to be on in that unit, that Google document, so you can actually look at these terms and maybe even make flashcards. I highly suggest it. And also, I will include these practice questions on here as well for this unit. And these are excellent STAR questions. Some of them you might recognize that we've done in class every day when we do our 30-second STAR question. but these are some extra questions. I'm not going to go through them right now for sake of time, but if you need to do anything else, you can look at them or review this as well. All right, I enjoyed it. I hope you did, and I hope you learned a lot, and I'm excited to see how well you do on this test. You will do great. See you soon.